The unbreakable commander breaks. The bridge of the eternal conquest stretched like a metallic cathedral through the void of space. At its center sat Commander Vexhar, his towering form cast in shadows that seemed to bend reality around him. For 800 years, his name had been whispered in terror across 47 galaxies. His tactical genius had crushed rebellions before they could even form. His fleet of 12,000 ships moved through space like a cosmic storm, leaving surrender or destruction in their wake. The Zephyrian High Council had once tried to map his strategic patterns. They spent decades analyzing his battle formations, his supply routes, his diplomatic maneuvers. In the end, they had simply concluded that Vexhar thought 12 moves ahead of everyone else in the galaxy. He was chess master playing against children, a cosmic force that had never known defeat. But today, for the first time in 8 centuries, Commander Vexhar was afraid. The holographic display before him showed something that challenged everything he understood about reality. Across the galaxy, ancient structures were awakening. The quantum mirrors, artifacts left behind by the mysterious architect race, were beginning to resonate with each other. Each mirror was the size of a small moon, their surfaces reflecting not light, but possibilities themselves. "Report, Admiral Koss," Vexhar commanded, his voice carrying the weight of dead worlds. Admiral Koss, a being whose species had evolved from crystalline formations, stepped forward. His body chimed softly as he moved, a sound that usually brought comfort, but now seemed ominous. "Commander, the situation has deteriorated beyond our projections. 17 more mirrors have activated in the past solar cycle. The quantum resonance is creating fractures in spacetime itself." The display zoomed to show the Andromeda sector, where reality seemed to be folding in on itself. Ships that ventured too close to the mirrors reported impossible phenomena. Some vessels aged centuries in minutes. Others found themselves scattered across multiple dimensions simultaneously. One frigate had returned with its crew speaking in unison about things that hadn't happened yet. "The physics make no sense, sir," continued Admiral Koss. "Our best scientists describe it as reality having a nervous breakdown. The mirrors seem to be rewriting the fundamental laws of existence in their vicinity." Vexhar studied the data with the same intensity he had once used to plan the conquest of the Spiral Arm. But this was different. This wasn't an enemy fleet he could outmaneuver or a rebellion he could crush. This was the universe itself coming apart at the seams. "What do our allies report?" he asked, though the word allies felt strange on his tongue. The Dominion had no true allies, only those too terrified to oppose them. "The ethereal collective has lost contact with 14 star systems," Admiral Koss replied. "The hive mind reports that some of their drone networks are thinking independently, which they describe as their greatest nightmare. The crystalline empire's mathematical models can't even process what's happening. They claim their calculating cores are producing poetry instead of tactical analyses." Vexhar's massive hands clenched into fists. He had spent centuries building an empire that spanned the known galaxy. He had unified species through fear and absolute authority. Now, something beyond his control was threatening to unravel everything he had created. The tactical display shifted to show the quantum mirror network in its entirety. There were 47 known mirrors scattered across the galaxy, each one positioned at what ancient star maps called consciousness nodes. The architects, whoever they had been, had placed these artifacts with purpose. But what that purpose was remained a mystery that had puzzled archaeologists for millennia. "Sir," Admiral Koss said hesitantly, "there's something else." The mirrors seemed to be responding to thought patterns. "Our psychic specialists report that the artifacts react more strongly to complex, organized minds. The more sophisticated the consciousness, the more violent the quantum disturbance." This explained why the galaxy's greatest civilizations were suffering the most. The ethereal collective, beings of pure thought and energy, found their home dimensions becoming uninhabitable. The hive mind, with its perfectly coordinated billions of drones, was fragmenting as the mirrors introduced chaos into their shared consciousness. Vexar himself had felt the effects during his last inspection of Mirror Station Omega. Standing near the artifact, his thoughts had become scattered, unfocused. For brief moments, his mind had experienced memories that weren't his own, tactical scenarios from battles he had never fought. It was as if the mirror was reflecting not just his present consciousness, but all possible versions of himself across infinite realities. "Commander," Admiral Koss continued, his crystalline form dimming with worry, "our science division has a theory. They believe the mirrors are some kind of test, left behind by the architects. But a test for what, we cannot determine." The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of the ship's massive engines. Vexar stared at the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. He had conquered the galaxy through absolute logic, perfect planning, and the understanding that every problem had a military solution. But this crisis seemed to mock those very principles. "What of the primitive species?" he asked suddenly. "The ones still trapped on single worlds, with minds too simple for interstellar warfare." Admiral Koss consulted his data streams. "Interestingly, sir, they seem largely unaffected. The mirrors near their systems show minimal activity. Our xenobiologists theorize that consciousness below a certain threshold doesn't trigger the quantum resonance." "Which systems?" "Several, but the most notable is a small blue world in Sector 7G. The inhabitants call it Earth. They're a young species, barely 10,000 years of recorded history. They've only just developed nuclear technology and are still centuries away from true space travel." Vexar had heard of Earth in passing, a backwater world populated by bipedal mammals who spent most of their time fighting each other over resources and ideology. Their minds were chaotic, unfocused, jumping from thought to thought without logical progression. By galactic standards, they were barely more intelligent than the various pest species that infested cargo holds. But perhaps that chaos was exactly what this situation required. "Bring me everything we know about these humans," Vexar commanded. Over the next several hours, intelligence reports flooded the bridge. Humans were indeed primitive by galactic standards, but they possessed certain unique characteristics. Their thought patterns were completely unpredictable, even to psychic species who could read most alien minds like books. They seemed capable of holding contradictory ideas simultaneously and making decisions based on incomplete information. Most peculiar of all, they appeared to thrive on uncertainty and chaos. "Look at this," Admiral Koss said, highlighting a section of the report. "During their conflicts, human generals often employ strategies that make no logical sense. They'll sacrifice tactical advantages for emotional reasons, or make seemingly random moves that somehow result in victory. Our analysts describe their military doctrine as beautiful madness." Vexar studied the data more closely. Human warfare was indeed chaotic, but there was something else. These beings seemed capable of finding patterns in randomness, of making intuitive leaps that bypassed logical analysis entirely. They called it thinking outside the box, a concept that made no sense to species who had perfected rational thought over millions of years. "Sir," Admiral Koss said, his voice barely above a whisper, "are you considering what I think you're considering?" Vexar was quiet for a long moment, staring at the image of Earth on the main display. It was a beautiful world, swirled with white clouds and blue oceans. So insignificant in the cosmic scale, yet it might hold the key to saving the galaxy. "Prepare a diplomatic envoy," he said finally. "We're going to ask the humans for help." The words felt like poison in his mouth. Commander Vexar, conqueror of galaxies, master of 47 civilizations, was about to beg for assistance from creatures who still killed each other over tribal differences. The irony was not lost on him. But as another alert flashed on the tactical display, showing 3 more star systems disappearing into quantum chaos, he realized that pride was a luxury the universe could no longer afford. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Maya Chen was having the worst day of her professional career. The quantum physics conference in Geneva had been a disaster. Her presentation on multidimensional probability matrices had been met with polite applause and uncomfortable questions. The academic community still considered her theories too radical, too far removed from established physics. She sat in her hotel room, staring at equations that covered every available surface. Her work suggested that reality was far more malleable than anyone suspected, that consciousness itself might play a role in determining the nature of existence. But without experimental proof, her ideas remained relegated to the fringes of theoretical physics. Her phone buzzed with another email from her department head, probably wondering when she'd return to teaching undergraduate courses instead of chasing impossible theories. Maya was about to close her laptop when every screen in the hotel began displaying the same message in dozens of languages. Citizens of Earth, do not panic. You are being contacted by representatives of the Galactic Dominion. We come seeking assistance with a matter of universal importance. Maya stared at the message, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate hoax. But as she looked out her window, she saw massive ships descending through the clouds, their hulls gleaming with technologies that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. First contact, and apparently they needed her help. Chaos theory saves the universe. The Dominion transport ship was unlike anything Maya had ever imagined. The interior seemed to exist in more dimensions than her mind could process, with corridors that curved through impossible angles and walls that showed glimpses of distant galaxies. She had been selected along with a handful of other scientists from around the world, each representing different aspects of human knowledge and creativity. Commander Vexar himself had come to Earth, a decision that sent shockwaves through his empire. For the first time in 8 centuries, the most feared being in the galaxy had left his flagship to visit a primitive world. He sat across from Maya in a conference room that was larger than most human buildings, his presence so overwhelming that she had to focus on her breathing to remain conscious. Dr. Chen, his voice rumbled like distant thunder, your species possesses something that mine does not. Your minds operate on principles that we cannot comprehend. Maya found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. With respect, Commander, I'm not sure I understand. Surely your civilization's knowledge far exceeds ours. Admiral Koss, who served as translator and cultural liaison, stepped forward. His crystalline form chimed softly as he spoke. Dr. Chen, please observe this holographic representation of a quantum mirror's resonance pattern when exposed to our thoughts. The display showed a perfect geometric pattern, beautiful in its symmetry and mathematical precision. The quantum waves formed crystalline structures that pulse with regular frequency. Now, Admiral Koss continued, observe what happens when we simulate human thought patterns. The display changed dramatically. Instead of geometric perfection, chaotic swirls of color and energy danced across the screen. The patterns had no discernible order, yet there was something hypnotic about their movement. They seemed alive, organic, constantly shifting and evolving. Your minds, Commander Vexar explained, create quantum signatures that our scientists describe as organized chaos. You can hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously, make intuitive leaps without logical progression, and find patterns in randomness. These abilities may be exactly what we need to understand the quantum mirrors. Maya studied the displays, her physicist's mind racing. You're saying that our supposed intellectual limitations might actually be advantages. Precisely, Admiral Koss replied. The mirrors appear to be some kind of consciousness test, but they respond negatively to purely logical thought. The more rational and organized a mind becomes, the more violent the quantum reaction. Over the following days, Maya and her human colleagues were given access to information that rewrote their understanding of the universe. The quantum mirrors had been created by the architects, an ancient race that had transcended physical existence billions of years ago. Before departing this reality, they had left behind these artifacts as a kind of cosmic examination. The architect's final message, translated from quantum fluctuations embedded in the mirrors themselves, suggests they were testing whether consciousness could evolve beyond pure logic. explained Dr. Zara Okafor, a theoretical physicist from Lagos who had joined the team. They believed that true wisdom required both order and chaos, logic and intuition. Maya began to see the pattern. The mirrors aren't malfunctioning. They're working exactly as designed. They're rejecting civilizations that have become too rigid in their thinking. But why? Asked Dr. James Morrison, a chaos theory specialist from MIT. What's the purpose? The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Vexhar himself had been studying human behavior, trying to understand how their minds worked. During one of their meetings, he made an observation that changed everything. "You humans have something my species lost long ago," he said, his voice carrying a weight of profound sadness. "You still dream of impossible things. When faced with a problem, you don't just calculate the optimal solution. You imagine solutions that don't exist, and then make them real." Maya realized he was right. Human civilization had always been driven by people who refused to accept limitations. They had dreamed of flight when it was impossible, explored the oceans when they were impassable, reached for the stars when space was an unreachable void. "The mirrors aren't just testing consciousness," she said, excitement building in her voice. "They're testing creativity, the ability to think beyond established parameters." Working together, the human team developed a radical theory. The quantum mirrors were designed to identify species capable of transcending their own limitations. The architects had reached a point where their perfect logic had become a prison, preventing them from evolving further. They had created the mirrors as a way to find successors who could break free from the tyranny of pure reason. But implementing this theory required something unprecedented: a direct mental link between human consciousness and the quantum field generators on Commander Vexhar's flagship. Maya would have to sync her chaotic human thought patterns with the ship's logical systems, while simultaneously interfacing with a quantum mirror. "The risks are considerable," Admiral Koss warned. "The quantum energies could destroy your mind, or worse, scatter your consciousness across multiple dimensions." Maya looked around the conference room at the greatest minds in the galaxy, all of them depending on her to solve a problem their vast intellects couldn't comprehend. What happens if we do nothing? "Universal collapse within 47 solar cycles," Commander Vexhar replied grimly. The connection procedure took place in the flagship's primary quantum laboratory, a chamber that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Maya lay connected to neural interfaces that made her head feel like it was filled with lightning, while banks of quantum processors translated her thoughts into mathematical equations. As the connection established, Maya's consciousness expanded beyond anything she had imagined possible. She could feel the network of quantum mirrors across the galaxy, each one pulsing with ancient purpose. But more than that, she could sense the presence of the architects themselves, not gone but transformed into something beyond physical existence. They had been waiting for a species that could think beyond the boundaries of logic, that could embrace uncertainty and chaos as tools for growth, rather than obstacles to overcome. The mirrors hadn't been destroying civilizations, they had been preparing the galaxy for this moment. Maya's chaotic human thoughts cascaded through the quantum network, her consciousness dancing between order and randomness. Where logical alien minds had tried to impose structure on the mirror's patterns, she embraced their inherent unpredictability. She didn't try to solve the quantum equations, she played with them, treating them like cosmic jazz improvisation rather than mathematical problems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the galaxy, the quantum mirrors began to resonate in harmony rather than discord. The reality fractures started healing. The dimensional chaos subsided, and the trapped ships found themselves returned to normal space. But the most remarkable change was in the mirrors themselves. Instead of reflecting possibilities, they began to generate them. Each mirror became a gateway to new forms of existence, new ways of thinking, new paths for consciousness to evolve. Commander Vexhar watched the transformation with something approaching wonder. For 8 centuries, he had ruled through fear and absolute control. But watching Maya work, Seeing how her chaotic creativity accomplished what his perfect logic could not, he began to understand something fundamental about power. True strength wasn't about control. It was about adaptability. It wasn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to ask new questions. As the quantum crisis ended and the galaxy began to stabilize, humanity found itself in an unprecedented position. They were no longer the primitive species on the galactic fringe. They had become the bridge between order and chaos, the consciousness that could navigate between logic and intuition. "Your people have given us a gift beyond measure," Commander Vexhar told Maya as the Dominion fleet prepared to return to its patrol routes. "You have shown us that evolution doesn't end with perfection. It begins there." Maya smiled, thinking about all the human dreams that had seemed impossible until someone made them real. "Commander, I think this is just the beginning. If the architects were right, if consciousness really can transcend its limitations, then maybe we're all about to discover what comes after wisdom." The quantum mirrors continued to pulse across the galaxy, no longer as tests but as gateways. And humanity, with their beautiful chaos and impossible dreams, had become the key to unlocking whatever came next in the evolution of consciousness itself. In the years that followed, the galaxy would never be the same. Rigid hierarchies gave way to creative collaborations. Perfect logic learned to dance with intuitive chaos, and at the center of it all, humanity continued to dream of impossible things and then make them real. The universe had been saved not by the greatest military mind in galactic history, but by a species that refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. It was, as the humans would say, a perfectly human solution to a cosmic problem.